So now it's time for our final segment on the show. It's called The First Laugh. I'm going to ask you a few questions about firsts in your life and career, starting with the first piece of comedy that made you laugh really hard as a kid growing up. What comes to mind?
I mean, what comes to mind is like I remember uh I remember like when I was old enough that my parents like they were like we were gonna go out with our friends tonight and you can just hang out. You can just hang out here. You don't have to have a babysitter. And that's when I like snuck downstairs and like watched Saturday Night Live for the first time. And I didn't get any of the jokes, but it all felt like so illicit and
Yeah,
like I was
exciting.
watching so that was exciting. So I feel like that's the first thing that comes to mind. Um um yeah, and if I think of a better answer while we're going, I'll let you know because that's not very specific. That just I don't remember even like a sketch that I
Well,
saw. I just remember that
yeah,
feeling like, oh, this is fun. Like this is fun.
yeah. What about the first time that you knew that you were funny, that you could make other people laugh?
Oh God, that would have been pretty early on, like somewhere in second and third grade. I remember always doing class clown shit. Um, and I was never really somebody that was interested in being an actor until I got to college. So I was never like, I didn't do plays. It wasn't really my thing, but I was always just like class clown, troublemaker shit. But I do remember one time a good lesson learned was I went to go see the movie Arachnophobia when it came out. And there was a moment where they like showed there was like a nest, like a spider's nest or something, and I shouted out chicken McNuggets in the theater, and like a bunch of people in the theater laughed, and I was like, oh, this is nice. And then it happened again, and I made a different chicken. I think I made a Kentucky Fried Chicken joke to the theater, and nobody laughed, and I was like,
Oh
oh,
no,
there's a lesson there.
there's a line.
And
Yeah, you crossed the line.
I crossed the line and like I went back to the well too quickly and I didn't get the reactions. So
So yeah,
I mean
formative
that I was
moment.
probably yeah, it was probably 14 when that happened. And so I think there was a lesson there of like, oh yeah, you can make people laugh and also you can make people not laugh if you do it wrong.
Uh, you mentioned that you were, doing commercials mostly before Veep. What was the first big or one of the first big commercials that you booked? And what do you remember about it?
Uh One was actually back in Chicago. I got cast in a Kentucky, oddly, considering the story I just told, a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial, and it ended up. This was like back when it was like the very beginning of people reading far too deep into very mundane things, and um, and anyway, there was a reaction to that is a little bit blue, so I won't talk about that, but I will point to
Well,
the
we
fact
have
that
no standards, but
we don't. Okay, so it was about a guy who was like I was playing the wingmaster, and he was the one that was the best at eating wings, and he sits down and his friends say, "Hey, you're no longer the wingmaster." And then the thing is, there's barbecue sauce all over my face, and they're like, "You're no longer the wingmaster." And then they cut to another guy who has more barbecue sauce on his face. And that was interpreted by some people as being a celebration of going down on women while they're on their period.
okay.
And yeah, but this also came up because I ran, do you know the Folgers commercial where everybody thinks it's about a like the incest Folgers commercial? Do you know anything about that?
No, I don't.
Go ahead and Google like GQ incest Folgers because they did an oral history of this commercial where it really seems like this brother and sister are gonna have sex. Like it really seems like that. And this was like way before I caught a break, way before I had gotten cast on Veep, that I like ran the camera for the commercial for like the casting
Oh,
sessions of that
so are you in
commercial.
the
And
oral
so was able
history?
I'm in the oral history. I
Oh,
got
very cool.
interviewed. So I will point people to that as like that. I think would be I mentioned the Kentucky Fried Chicken thing in there, but I think that might be my lasting contribution to that world is that there was an incest Folgers commercial that people
That
talk
you're
about
just
a lot
partially responsible for. Yeah.
that I'm
Um,
partially responsible.
do you have a story or memory about the first time you met one of your really big comedy heroes, and what it was like to meet them for the first time?
I I when we first got cast, when Veep first started, I remember so we got nominated for best comedy um in our first year. And it was when I think Julia got nominated, Tony got nominated. I can't remember if that's exactly true, but that's my memory of it. And so it was like the first time that I was ever going to be going around that I was going to be going around like to like Emmy parties and stuff. And this was when Boardwalk Empire was still on HBO. I think we sort of overlapped with them, like their last few years and our first few years overlapped. And Steve Buscemi has always been somebody who, like, to your point of like, trying to have a varied career, I think Steve Buscemi is somebody that you can really point to as like somebody who's been able to do everything and is good at everything.
Oh yeah.
And he's been somebody that I loved forever. And that was a moment where I don't think I embarrassed myself, or if I did, he was very gracious and we got past the embarrassing parts. But I did go up to him to just to do the thing where it's like, man, I've been watching him uh, everything from like Adam Sandler movies that he was in to Armageddon to like he played Mr. Hickle on The Adventures of Pete and Pete and like Reservoir Dogs, all these things that he's done and that he's been incredible in. Just I was able to talk to him and he was really gracious and very nice. And uh, his wife who passed away a few years ago, I got to meet her and we ended up talking about his kids and about Mr. Hickle. I don't know. That was a really great moment. Only because he allowed me to sort of embarrass myself and then brought me back from it. And I've
Nice.
always appreciated him as a performer, and that was a really great moment.
Our final question on the show is: do you have a story or memory from your career that makes you laugh now, but really was not funny when it happened?
Oh God. Um, oh, I mean, I'm pausing way too long, and I'm hoping that you can
We can trim the
edit.
pause. We can trim the pause. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let me just think for another moment and see if I can come up with a good one because there are going to be far, far too many of things that were very not great in the moment. Um, uh, the only one that's coming to mind that I think I might have told before is that I had to do like a cold read in a voiceover audition, and I was in the room like they were auditioning people two at a time, and so I read this audition and I pronounced the word orangutan as organtuan because I had not been able to read it beforehand. And I just said organtuan and I didn't really realize what I had done until the next person read and he said orangutan. And I was just like, nobody fucking told me because they were all so like it was so clear. When I heard that, all of like the reverse engineering of, oh, they were all so embarrassed for me that they didn't say anything. And it makes me laugh now, but at the time I was like, I feel like a fucking doofus. And that was pretty embarrassing. That's not an amazing story, and I'm sure that as soon as we hang up, I'll think of a better one. But I don't know.
That's pretty good.
It might just be that there are so many I've blocked them out.